My teenager asked, "Why Daddy doesn't love Mommy?" How do I answer that? Would you believe me if I told you that a single question from my 15-year-old daughter shattered the illusion I'd been desperately holding together for years? "Why doesn't Daddy love Mommy?" she asked, her voice trembling just enough to betray how much this had been weighing on her. I was standing at the kitchen sink, hands submerged in lukewarm, soapy water, surrounded by the everyday chaos of our Plano, Texas home. Dishwasher humming, the scent of reheated coffee lingering in the air, sunlight cutting sharp lines across the granite countertop. In that moment, every carefully constructed piece of my life threatened to collapse. And by the end of this story, you'll understand not only how that question forced me to confront 20 years of denial, but how it ultimately set me, and my family, on a path I never could have imagined. I froze, dish in hand, as Madison's question hung between us. I could hear Tyler, our 10-year-old, stomping up the stairs in the background, his usual after-school routine punctuated by the sound of his backpack hitting the floor and his sneakers squeaking against the hardwood. But none of that registered. All I could see was Madison's face, pale and anxious, her hazel eyes fixed on me with a kind of raw vulnerability I hadn't seen since she was a little girl. I tried to speak, but the words caught in my throat, tangled up with panic and guilt. I'd always told myself I was shielding my kids from the cracks in my marriage, but in that instant, I realized I'd been fooling myself. Kids see everything, don't they? Even when we think we're protecting them. Let me back up a little. On the outside, our life was the picture-perfect suburban dream. We lived on Maple Avenue, in a 2-story brick house with a manicured lawn, a white SUV in the driveway, and a backyard big enough for neighborhood barbecues and endless games of tag. Our days were a blur of school drop-offs, soccer practices, PTA meetings, and Target runs. I was the mom who signed up for bake sales and organized the neighborhood block party every 4th of July. Jonathan, my husband, worked long hours at a Dallas tech firm, a job that paid for our vacations to Destin and covered the mortgage, but seemed to keep him further and further away from us, even when he was home. Our marriage, once full of laughter and midnight talks, had become a silent negotiation. We moved around each other like polite strangers, sharing space but rarely sharing ourselves. I felt the distance growing, but I kept telling myself it was just a phase. Every couple goes through rough patches, right? But deep down, I knew this was different. The tension in the air wasn't just about stress or exhaustion. It was something more fundamental, something that neither of us wanted to name out loud. That morning, before Madison cornered me in the kitchen, Jonathan had left for work without so much as a goodbye. I'd heard his keys jingling in the foyer while I packed Tyler's lunch, the sound oddly final. He moved through the house with a kind of practiced efficiency, grabbed his travel mug, checked his phone, barely met my eyes as we passed in the hallway. "Have a good day," I'd managed, my voice too bright, too eager. "You too," he replied, already halfway out the door. The silence he left behind was deafening. I replayed those moments over and over while Madison waited for my answer, her question echoing in my mind. I wanted to protect her, to give her reassurance, but how could I do that when I wasn't even sure what the truth was anymore? Should I lie? Pretend everything was fine? Or should I be honest, risk shattering her sense of security? My own parents had divorced when I was Madison's age. I remembered the confusion, the whispered arguments, the feeling of being caught in a storm I couldn't escape. I'd promised myself back then that my kids would never have to go through the same thing. And yet, here we were. I forced myself to meet Madison's gaze. Her hands were clenched around the strap of her backpack, knuckles white, as if she was bracing for impact. "Honey," I started, but the rest of the sentence died on my lips. I could see the hope flicker in her eyes, the desperate wish that I'd tell her she was wrong, that everything was okay. But I couldn't give her that. Not without lying to both of us. The truth is, I'd seen the signs for years, the missed date nights, the way Jonathan stopped reaching for my hand on the couch, stopped laughing at my jokes, The way he volunteered for every work trip, every late-night meeting, until I have to go into the office, became as routine as pass the salt. I tried to convince myself it was just stress, the pressures of work and parenting, but the excuses started to sound hollow even to me. I glanced at the clock on the microwave, 4:12 p.m. In less than an hour, I'd have to start dinner, wrangle Tyler, help with homework, and slip back into the role of the perfect suburban mom. But right then, all I could do was stand there, paralyzed by the weight of Madison's question. I wanted to hug her, to tell her that love is complicated, that grown-ups sometimes lose their way. But the words felt inadequate. Because, truthfully, I didn't have the answer. Not for her, not for myself. Before I could say anything, my phone buzzed on the counter. I glanced down and saw Jonathan's name light up the screen. A simple text. Running late. Don't wait up for dinner. My stomach twisted. Another night alone at the dinner table. Another excuse. I looked back at Madison and saw the hurt in her eyes deepen. She didn't say anything, but I could tell she'd seen the message. She knew, just as I did, that this was our new normal. As I tried to gather myself, I thought back to the early days of our marriage. Jonathan and I met at the University of Texas. He was charming, spontaneous, the life of every party. We fell in love fast, the kind of whirlwind romance that makes you believe anything is possible. We dreamed of traveling the world, raising a family, building a life filled with adventure and laughter. For a while, it felt like we were invincible. Even after Madison was born, we managed to keep the spark alive. Date nights at the little Italian place on Spring Street, lazy Sundays at White Rock Lake, inside jokes whispered over the heads of our sleeping children. But somewhere along the way, reality set in. Jonathan's job demanded more and more of his time. I decided to stay home after Tyler was born, a choice that made sense for our family but slowly chipped away at my sense of self. The days became a blur of diapers, playdates, meal prep, and endless laundry. Jonathan retreated into his work, and I retreated into motherhood. We stopped talking about anything real. When we did, it was about the kids, the bills, the never-ending list of things that needed fixing around the house. I tried to fill the void with busy work, volunteering for every PTA committee, hosting book club, organizing community bake sales. I told myself I was just being a good mom, a good neighbor, but if I'm honest, I was trying to distract myself from the emptiness settling in my chest. The loneliness was a quiet ache, a constant companion even in a house full of noise. Our neighborhood on Maple Avenue was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone's business. The moms competed over who could throw the best birthday party, whose kids were in the most activities, whose lawn was the greenest. I played along, smiling at the block parties, exchanging recipes at the bake sales. But I always felt like an outsider looking in. I envied the couples who still held hands, who laughed together on their front porches, who seemed genuinely happy. I told myself that appearances could be deceiving, that maybe everyone was struggling, just hiding it better. But it didn't make me feel any less alone. I thought about all of this as Madison stood in front of me waiting for an answer. I realized that her question wasn't just about Jonathan and me. It was about her, about Tyler, about the kind of family we were becoming. I wanted to protect her, to shield her from the pain of growing up. But I knew I couldn't. She was old enough to see the truth, even if she didn't understand it yet. I took a deep breath and finally spoke. Madison, sometimes grown-ups have a hard time showing how they feel. It doesn't mean they don't love each other or that they don't love you and Tyler. It just means that things can get complicated. I watched her process my words, her lips pressed into a thin line. She didn't look convinced, but she nodded anyway. "Are you and Dad going to get divorced?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. My heart broke a little more. I wanted to tell her no, to promise her that everything would be okay. But I couldn't lie. Not anymore. "I don't know, sweetheart," I said softly. "But whatever happens, you and Tyler will always be loved. That will never change." She looked at me for a long moment, then turned and walked upstairs without another word. I watched her go, feeling like I'd failed her somehow. I remembered my own mother sitting me down, trying to explain why my dad was moving out, the way her voice shook as she promised me that nothing would change. I swore I'd never put my own kids through that. But promises, I was learning, are easier made than kept. I stood there for a long time after Madison left, staring out the window at the quiet street. The sun was starting to set, casting long shadows across the lawn. I could see my neighbor, Angela, walking her golden retriever, waving at another mom pushing a stroller down the sidewalk. Life went on, oblivious to the storm brewing inside my house. The silence was interrupted by the sound of Tyler yelling from his room, asking for help with his math homework. I wiped my hands on a dish towel, forced a smile onto my face, and went upstairs to help him, slipping back into the role of the dependable mom. But inside, I felt like I was holding onto a thread that could snap at any moment. That night, after the kids were in bed, I sat alone in the living room, the only light coming from the TV playing some mindless reality show in the background. I scrolled through old photos on my phone, pictures of family vacations, birthday parties, Christmas mornings. I studied Jonathan's face in each one, searching for signs of the man I married, wondering when he'd started slipping away. I found myself crying, quietly, so the kids wouldn't hear. Just as I was about to turn in for the night, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Jonathan. Staying at the office late. Don't wait up. No explanation. No apology. I stared at the screen, feeling a mix of anger and resignation. I knew I should confront him, demand answers, but I was so tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of pretending. Tired of being the only one trying to hold everything together. As I climbed into bed, I realized that Madison's question was just the beginning. There were things I needed to face, truths I'd been avoiding for too long. And deep down, I knew that the real story was only just starting to unfold, but I still didn't know the worst of it. Not yet. Because as I drifted off to sleep, I heard Jonathan's car pull into the driveway, hours later than he'd promised. I listened as he moved quietly through the house, careful not to wake anyone. And for the first time, a new, darker suspicion crept into my mind, one that would change everything I thought I knew about my marriage. The next morning, I woke up with that heavy feeling in my chest that only comes after a night spent tossing and turning, replaying every conversation, every look, every missed opportunity. The Texas sun was just barely starting to peek through the blinds, casting long golden stripes across the foot of our bed. Jonathan's side was already empty, cold, the sheets barely rumpled. I listened to the muffled sounds from downstairs. The low whir of the Keurig, cabinet doors opening and closing, the faint clatter of a spoon against a coffee mug. I pulled on my robe and made my way to the bathroom, avoiding my own reflection in the mirror. My mind was racing, but my body moved almost on autopilot, brushing my teeth, tying my hair up, splashing cold water on my face. The routine was familiar, grounding, but it couldn't quiet the storm brewing inside me. Downstairs, Madison sat at the kitchen counter, scrolling through her phone, earbuds in, her backpack slung carelessly over the back of the chair. Tyler was at the table, shoveling cereal into his mouth while watching cartoons on his iPad. The normalcy of the scene struck me. It looked like any other weekday morning in any house on Maple Avenue. But I felt like an outsider in my own home, like I was watching someone else's life play out. Jonathan stood by the sink, dressed for work, the knot in his tie slightly crooked. He glanced up as I entered, his eyes flickering with something. Guilt? Exhaustion? Maybe both. Morning, he said, voice flat. Morning, I replied, forcing a smile. We moved around each other silently, the air thick with unspoken words. I poured myself a cup of coffee, the bitter aroma filling the kitchen, and tried to steady my hands. Madison looked up, pulling one earbud out. Mom, can you sign my field trip form? She asked. I nodded, grateful for something so ordinary to focus on. As I signed the paper, I couldn't help but notice the way Jonathan avoided my gaze, his attention fixed on his phone. The tension was almost suffocating, and I wondered if the kids could feel it too. Of course they could. Children always know more than we think. After Jonathan left, there was a quiet that felt both peaceful and ominous. The kids finished getting ready, and I drove them to school in our silver Chevy Tahoe, the same route we took every day. The streets of Plano were lined with neat lawns and American flags, the early morning light casting everything in a soft, forgiving glow. But inside the car, the silence was heavy. At drop-off, Tyler hopped out first, running toward his friends without a backward glance. Madison lingered, her hand on the door handle. "Mom?" she said quietly. "Are you okay?" I blinked, caught off guard. "Of course, honey. Why do you ask?" She shrugged, not meeting my eyes. "You just seem sad lately. And Daddy's always gone. I just want things to go back to normal." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I wanted to promise her that everything would be okay, that this was just a rough patch, but I couldn't bring myself to lie. "I know it's been hard," I said softly. "But no matter what, your dad and I both love you and Tyler. That will never change." She nodded, but I could tell she wasn't convinced. I watched her disappear into the crowd of students, my heart aching. After I got home, I went through the motions of my daily routine, unloading the dishwasher, wiping down the counters, tidying up the living room. But my mind kept drifting back to the night before, to Jonathan's late arrival, and the look on his face when he thought no one was watching. I tried to shake it off, but the feeling lingered. I decided to distract myself with errands, a trip to Target for groceries, and a quick stop at Starbucks for a much-needed caffeine boost. As I waited in the drive-thru, my phone buzzed with a message from my best friend, Heather. "Wine night tonight? You look like you need it." I smiled despite myself. Heather had a knack for knowing when I was struggling, even if I hadn't said a word. I texted back, "Definitely. 7 p.m.? By noon, the house was quiet again. The only sounds the hum of the fridge and the occasional bark from our neighbor's dog. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the stack of bills and PTA forms that needed my attention. I reached for my planner, flipping through pages filled with color-coded appointments and reminders, soccer practice, dentist appointments, HOA meetings. Life went on, even when it felt like mine was falling apart. I thought about calling Jonathan, asking him to come home early so we could talk, but I was afraid of what that conversation would bring. Instead, I busied myself with meal prep, chopping vegetables for dinner, the rhythmic sound of the knife a small comfort. Around 3 p.m. I headed out for school pickup. The Texas heat was already unbearable, and I blasted the AC as I waited in the carpool line. Other moms waved from their SUVs, some chatting on Bluetooth, others scrolling through their phones. I felt a pang of envy for their easy smiles, their seemingly perfect lives. Madison slid into the passenger seat, her face flushed from the sun. "Can we get ice cream?" she asked, a hopeful lilt in her voice. "Sure," I said, eager for any excuse to prolong our time together. We stopped at a little shop on Park Avenue, the kind with neon signs and sticky floors. As we sat together, licking melting cones, Madison opened up. "Are you and Dad fighting?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I hesitated, searching for the right words. "Sometimes grown-ups have disagreements," I said carefully. "But that doesn't mean we don't care about each other, or about you and Tyler." She looked unconvinced. "But it feels different. He barely talks to you. He barely talks to me." I took a deep breath, fighting back tears. "I know it's been tough, but families go through hard times. What matters is that we're here for each other." She nodded, but the sadness in her eyes was unmistakable. That evening, after dinner, Jonathan was late again. The kids did their homework while I cleaned up, the quiet interrupted only by the sound of Madison's pencil scratching across the page and Tyler's occasional complaints about math. I checked my phone. No message from Jonathan. By 7 p.m., Heather arrived for our wine night, a bottle of Cabernet in hand and a sympathetic smile on her face. We settled on the back patio, the cicadas buzzing in the humid air, the sky painted with streaks of pink and orange. "Okay," Heather said, pouring us each a generous glass. "Spill, what's going on?" I hesitated, staring at the condensation on my glass. I don't even know where to start. Madison asked me this morning why Jonathan doesn't love me. Heather's eyes widened. Ouch. That's rough. I didn't know what to say, I admitted. I just tried to reassure her, but I think she knows more than I want her to. Heather reached over, squeezing my hand. "Kids are smart, but you're doing the best you can." I nodded, grateful for her support. For a moment, I allowed myself to relax, to believe that things might get better. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. The late nights, the distance, the secrets. "Do you think there's someone else?" I blurted out before I could stop myself. Heather was quiet for a moment. "Do you?" I shrugged, tears stinging my eyes. "I don't know what to think anymore. He's been so distant. And last night he came home really late. He said he was working, but—" Heather leaned in, her expression serious. "If you want to know, you need to look for the signs. Trust your gut." Her words echoed in my mind long after she left. Later that night, after I tucked the kids into bed, I sat alone in the living room, the only light coming from the glow of the TV. I scrolled mindlessly through Facebook, comparing my messy reality to the curated perfection of other families. Happy couples, smiling kids, vacations to Disney World. I wondered how many of those smiles were real, and how many were just for show. My mind kept circling back to Jonathan. I tried to remember the last time we'd been truly happy, the last time he'd looked at me with anything other than frustration or indifference. I thought about our wedding day, the promises we made, the life we'd planned together. It all felt so distant, like a story that happened to someone else. The next morning, I woke up determined to find answers. After dropping the kids at school, I drove to Jonathan's office, a sleek glass building in downtown Dallas. I told myself I was just bringing him lunch, but really, I wanted to see for myself what was going on. When I arrived, the receptionist greeted me with a polite smile, but I could sense her surprise. "Jonathan's in a meeting," she said. "Should I let him know you're here?" I hesitated, then shook my head. "That's okay. I'll just leave this for him." As I turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of Jonathan through the glass conference room door. He was laughing, relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in years. Sitting next to him was a woman, blonde, stylish, about my age. The two of them leaned in close, their body language intimate, familiar. My stomach twisted, and I hurried out before anyone could see the tears in my eyes. On the drive home, I replayed the scene over and over. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe I was reading too much into it. But the doubt gnawed at me, growing with every mile. Back at home, I tried to focus on the usual routine: laundry, emails, a quick call with the PTA to confirm I'd bring cookies for the bake sale next week. But I couldn't shake the image of Jonathan with that woman, the way he smiled at her, the way I couldn't remember the last time he'd smiled at me like that. When the kids got home, I did my best to act normal. Madison retreated to her room, headphones on, lost in her own world. Tyler wanted help with his science project, and I threw myself into it, grateful for the distraction. That night, after everyone was asleep, I found myself standing in the doorway to our bedroom, watching Jonathan as he typed on his laptop. He didn't look up. "Can we talk?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He sighed, closing the laptop. "What about?" I hesitated. "About us, about what's been going on." He rubbed his forehead, looking tired. "I'm just stressed with work, Amy. That's all." I wanted to believe him, but the words felt hollow. As I lay in bed that night staring at the ceiling, I realized I was at a crossroads. I could keep pretending, keep going through the motions, or I could face the truth, whatever that might be. But I still didn't know the worst of it. Not yet. Because the next day, something happened that changed everything. And when it did, I realized I'd only uncovered a fraction of the whole truth. If you've ever been in that place, caught between wanting to protect your family and needing to know the truth, leave a like. Because what happened next was the moment my life took a turn I never saw coming. The next morning started off deceptively normal, almost painfully so. The sun was already bright through the blinds when I woke up. Later than I meant to, my alarm lost somewhere under a pile of laundry I'd been meaning to fold for days. The house was quiet, except for the muffled thump of Madison's music drifting from her room and the hum of the dryer in the hallway. I lay there for a moment, staring at the cracks in the ceiling, wondering how long I could pretend that yesterday's conversation with Jonathan hadn't happened. But the pit in my stomach told me otherwise. There was no going back now. I forced myself up, pulling on yoga pants and a faded Plano Wildcats t-shirt. As I moved around the kitchen, the familiar routines grounded me. Pouring cereal for Tyler, packing up his lunch, making sure his backpack had his homework and his inhaler. I set out the usual note. "Have a great day, love you, Mom," tucked carefully into the side pocket where he'd find it later. Madison came down last, earbuds in, her eyes smudged with leftover mascara she hadn't bothered to wash off. She barely glanced at me as she grabbed a granola bar, and I felt the sting of it. How quickly the gap between us had widened since our talk in the kitchen. Jonathan was already gone. The garage door must have rolled up and down before I even woke, his car missing from the driveway like a vanishing act. I tried not to take it personally, but I did. I always did. After the kids left for school, Tyler trailing behind Madison as she rolled her eyes at his attempts to walk with her, I stood at the sink, staring out into the backyard. The grass needed mowing. The fence on the left side was starting to lean. The neighbor's dog barked at nothing, as usual. I felt like I was standing at the center of my life, looking out at all the little cracks that had started to appear, wondering when they'd become too big to ignore. I needed to talk to someone. I grabbed my phone and texted Heather. "Can you meet for coffee? I need to get out of my head." She replied instantly. "Starbucks. 9:30. I'll buy." My relief was almost physical. Driving to Starbucks on Park Avenue, I rehearsed what I'd say. Heather had been my friend since before Madison was born. She'd seen the highs and lows, the messy playdates, the wine-soaked PTA meetings, the late-night texts about toddler fevers and homework meltdowns. But I'd never told her the things I was thinking now. Never said the words out loud. I think my marriage might be falling apart. I wasn't sure I could. The place was crowded with the usual crowd. Soccer moms in leggings, a couple of dads with laptops, the same barista who always remembered my name. Heather waved from a corner table, already halfway through her cold brew. I sat down, wrapping my hands around the paper cup, and for a moment we just looked at each other. She didn't waste time. "You look like you haven't slept." I tried to laugh, but it came out shaky. "I haven't. Things are rough with Jonathan." Heather leaned in, voice low. "Is it bad?" I hesitated. The words felt heavy on my tongue. "I found a hotel receipt in his jacket. For last Thursday. He said he was working late." Her eyes widened. "Oh, Amy." "I confronted him," I said, my voice almost a whisper. "He swears there's no one else, just that he's unhappy, that he feels trapped." Heather was quiet for a moment, stirring her coffee. "Do you believe him?" I shook my head, tears pricking my eyes. "I don't know. I want to. But I don't know." She reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "You have to protect yourself. Check the credit card statements, the phone records. You have a right to know." I nodded, but my stomach twisted at the thought. I wasn't sure I wanted the truth. Not if it meant tearing our family apart. The rest of the day passed in a blur of distractions. Grocery shopping at Target, a quick stop at Walgreens for Tyler's allergy meds, home in time to start the chicken for dinner. I kept glancing at my phone, half hoping Jonathan would text, half dreading it. He didn't. That afternoon, as I waited in the carpool line, the Texas heat turning my SUV into an oven, I scrolled through our credit card app. My hands shook as I clicked through the last month's transactions. There were a few things that didn't make sense. 2 lunches at Panera on the same day in downtown Dallas. A charge at a florist I'd never heard of. Another hotel charge for a Saturday in March. I screenshotted everything, my heart pounding in my ears. I wanted to scream, to cry, to throw my phone across the dash, but I didn't. I pasted on a smile as Tyler climbed in, sweaty from recess, chattering about his science project. Madison slid into the back seat, her eyes glued to her phone, and I wondered what she was texting, if she was talking about me, about us. When we got home, I tried to act normal. I helped Tyler with his homework, nagged Madison to start on her history essay, started prepping dinner. My hands moved automatically, peeling carrots, measuring rice, marinating chicken, while my mind raced through every possibility. Had I missed the signs? Was this my fault? Was I so busy being a good mom that I'd forgotten how to be a wife? That evening, Jonathan came home late. The kids were already upstairs, the house quiet except for the dishwasher running in the background. He looked exhausted, like he'd aged 10 years overnight. We stood in the kitchen, the tension between us thick enough to choke on. He finally spoke. "We need to talk." I braced myself. "About what?" He took a deep breath, not meeting my eyes. "About us. About what's been going on. I got your texts." I nodded, waiting. He rubbed the back of his neck, searching for words. "I'm not happy, Amy. I haven't been for a long time. I don't know how to fix it. I don't even know if it can be fixed." My throat tightened. "Is there someone else?" He shook his head, but I saw something flicker across his face. Guilt, or maybe just pain. "No, there isn't. I swear. It's just... everything feels so heavy. The house, the kids, the bills. I feel like I'm drowning, and I can't get my head above water." I wanted to reach out to him, but I didn't. I just stood there, arms folded, holding myself together. "Do you want a divorce?" I asked quietly. He hesitated. "I don't know. I don't want to hurt the kids. I don't want to hurt you. But you're hurting me anyway," I said, my voice shaking. "Every day that we live like this, pretending nothing's wrong." He closed his eyes, and for a moment I saw the boy I married, the one who made me laugh in the rain outside our first apartment, who cried when Madison was born. I missed him so much my chest ached. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I really am." The silence stretched between us, thick with everything we weren't saying. When he finally went upstairs, I stayed at the kitchen table, staring at the bills and grocery lists and permission slips spread out in front of me. Everything felt so fragile, like one wrong move would send it all crashing down. The next morning, I woke up to Madison standing by my bed, her face pale and serious. "Mom, can we talk?" I sat up, brushing hair from my face. "Of course, honey. What's wrong?" She hesitated, twisting her hands. "Are you and Dad getting divorced?" The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I wanted to lie, to tell her everything would be fine. But I couldn't. Not anymore. "We're trying to figure things out," I said carefully. "It's complicated, Maddie, but whatever happens, your dad and I both love you and Tyler more than anything. That will never change." She looked away, blinking fast. "I just want things to go back to normal." I reached for her, pulling her into a hug. She felt small, younger than 15. "Me too," I whispered. "Me too." She pulled away, wiping her eyes. "If you get divorced, do we have to move? Will we have to switch schools?" The fear in her voice broke me. "No, sweetheart. We'll figure it out. I promise." Later that day, I called a family therapist, a woman named Dr. Karen Mitchell, recommended by a neighbor. I left a shaky voicemail, explaining that we needed help, that our family was falling apart and I didn't know what else to do. The days started to blur together. Jonathan and I moved around each other like ghosts, polite, careful, but never really touching. The kids picked up on it. Tyler became clingy, refusing to go to sleep unless I lay next to him. Madison started spending more time at friends' houses, coming home late and slamming her door. I felt like I was losing both of them, piece by piece. One night, after the kids were asleep, I went through Jonathan's briefcase, searching for something. I didn't even know what. Instead, I found another receipt. This one was for a jewelry store in downtown Dallas. A necklace, dated a week before our anniversary, but I never received it. My heart hammered in my chest as I stared at the slip of paper. Was it for me? Was it for someone else? The questions buzzed in my head like angry bees, each one worse than the last. I confronted him again, my voice barely above a whisper. Who is she? He looked at me, surprised. What are you talking about? I held up the receipt, my hand shaking. The necklace, the hotel, the flowers. I know there's someone else, Jonathan. Just tell me the truth. He ran both hands through his hair, frustration etched on his face. It's not what you think. The necklace, it was for your birthday. I never gave it to you because I didn't know how to make anything right anymore. I left it in my office desk. I swear to you, Amy, there's no one else. His words sounded sincere, but I didn't know what to believe anymore. I wanted to scream, to break something, but all I could do was cry. He tried to reach for me, but I pulled away. I need space, I said. I need to think. That night I slept in the guest room, curled up under an old quilt, listening to the sounds of the house, the creak of the air conditioning, the distant bark of the neighbor's dog, the faint hum of Jonathan's TV through the wall. I felt more alone than I ever had in my life. The next day I called Heather again. We met at the park, sitting on a bench while Tyler played on the swings and Madison sulked nearby, pretending not to watch us. I told her everything, the hotel receipts, the necklace, the fights, the silence. She listened, holding my hand, her eyes sad. You have to take care of yourself, she said gently. Whatever Jonathan's doing or feeling, you deserve to be happy. So do your kids. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. I just don't know how to fix any of it. She squeezed my hand. Maybe it's not about fixing it. Maybe it's about surviving it. One day at a time. That night, after the kids were in bed, I sat in the backyard, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the stars. The air was cool, the scent of cut grass and distant barbecue drifting on the breeze. I thought about all the versions of my life that might have been. If I'd made different choices, loved differently, been braver or more cautious or more honest. I didn't have any answers. But for the first time, I let myself imagine a future where I wasn't afraid. And just when I thought I'd finally uncovered the truth, that it was just unhappiness, just distance, just the slow erosion of love, something happened that changed everything. Because as I was collecting the laundry from Madison's room, I found something under her bed that made my heart stop. A folded piece of paper torn from her notebook with the words, "I know what you did." My hands shook as I opened it, reading the rest. Her handwriting jagged and angry, page after page of what she'd seen, what she suspected, what she was afraid of. She knew more than I thought. She'd heard us fighting. She'd seen Jonathan cry. She'd read my texts to Heather on my iPad. She'd even followed Jonathan once, after school, and seen him meeting someone at a coffee shop downtown. I felt the world tilt beneath me. My daughter wasn't just a bystander. She was right in the middle of it, carrying secrets I'd tried so hard to hide. And suddenly, I realized I didn't know the whole story at all. Because when I confronted Madison about the note, she told me something that made everything I thought I knew about my marriage and my family feel like a lie. What she revealed next was beyond anything I could have imagined, and it changed everything. My hands trembled as I held Madison's note, the words burning into my mind. All those late-night whispers, the hushed arguments I thought we'd managed to hide, the texts I'd deleted, the carefully curated smiles at soccer games, none of it had protected her. I'd tried so hard to be the buffer, to keep her and Tyler insulated from the storm inside our house, but she'd seen more than I ever imagined. My heart pounded as I sat beside her on her bed, the walls covered with photos of friends, cheerful string lights, and Taylor Swift posters. She wouldn't meet my eyes at first, staring at her chipped teal nail polish, her fingers worrying the hem of her hoodie. "Madison?" I finally whispered, voice raw. "Why didn't you tell me?" She shrugged, her whole body folding in on itself, so much older than her 15 years. "Because I thought you'd be mad, or make it worse, or maybe you'd leave and then it would all fall apart anyway." I felt like I'd swallowed glass. I reached for her hand, but she hesitated before letting me hold it. "Honey, I'm so sorry. I never wanted you to feel like you had to keep secrets." She blinked fast, jaw tight, then blurted, "I followed Dad last Friday, after school. He wasn't at work. He was at that coffee shop across from the library, the one with the blue awning. He wasn't alone, Mom." The world seemed to slow. I heard the hum of the air conditioning, the distant bark of a neighbor's dog, the quiet thump of Tyler's video game from down the hall. Everything normal, everything fractured. I tried to steady my voice. "Who was he with?" She swallowed, eyes shining. "A woman. I couldn't see her face, but they were sitting close. He was smiling, laughing. I haven't seen him look like that with you in forever." For a second, I wanted to deny it. Tell her she was mistaken, that there had to be an explanation. But I remembered the hotel receipt, the late nights, the scent of unfamiliar perfume. The truth pressed in on me, sharp and cold. I took a shaky breath. "Madison, I found something too. A receipt. And I asked your father. He said he wasn't cheating, but I don't know what to believe anymore." She squeezed my hand, so fiercely it hurt. "I just want you to be happy. I want us to be a family. But it feels like we're all pretending and nobody's telling the truth." I pulled her into my arms, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I stroked her hair, whispering the words I wished could fix everything. "I'm so sorry you've been carrying this alone. You should never have had to." The ache in my chest was unbearable. For years, I'd told myself I was shielding my kids from pain, but all I'd really done was give them a front-row seat to heartbreak. Madison deserved more than secrets and half-truths. She deserved honesty, even if it hurt. That night, after the kids were in bed, I sat at the kitchen table alone, the house silent except for the faint buzz of the refrigerator and the ticking of the clock. My phone lit up with a text from Jonathan. "Working late. Don't wait up." Something inside me snapped. I couldn't do this anymore. Couldn't keep patching over the cracks, pretending we were still the couple who'd danced under fairy lights at our wedding, who'd whispered dreams into each other's ears late at night. The woman Jonathan had become was a stranger to me, and maybe I was one to him too. I poured myself a glass of wine, hands still unsteady, and opened my laptop. I started searching for therapists in Plano, for resources about helping teens through divorce, for any scrap of wisdom that might help me chart a path forward. The more I scrolled, the more overwhelmed I felt. Every article seemed to contradict the last. Stay together for the kids. Don't model unhealthy relationships. Kids are resilient. Divorce scars children forever. I closed the laptop, pressing my palms to my eyes, wishing someone could just tell me what to do. But the decision was mine. Ours. And it was a choice I couldn't make alone. The next morning, after dropping Tyler at school, his backpack bouncing, his hair still cowlicked from sleep, I drove to Jonathan's office. The building was all glass and steel, cold and imposing, sunlight glinting off the windows. I sat in the parking lot, heart pounding, forcing myself to breathe. I texted him, "I'm downstairs, we need to talk." He replied almost instantly, "Now?" I typed back, "Yes. Please." A few minutes later, he came out, jacket slung over his arm, tie loosened. He didn't look surprised to see me, just tired. We sat in my car, the air thick with things unsaid. I stared at my hands on the steering wheel, then out the window at a family walking by. Mother, father, 2 kids, all laughter and ease. I wondered what secrets they might be hiding. Finally, I turned to him. Madison knows. His jaw clenched. Knows what? She followed you last week. She saw you with someone at the coffee shop. She wrote me a note. She's terrified we're going to fall apart. He looked away, fingers drumming on his knee. It wasn't what it looked like. I almost laughed. Bitter, exhausted. Wasn't it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you'd rather be anywhere but home. It looks like you're done. Are you? He met my eyes then, and for the first time in months, I saw real emotion there. Not anger, not irritation, but something raw and vulnerable. I don't know. I'm lost, Ashley. I haven't known what I want for a long time. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. I forced myself to ask the question I'd been avoiding. Is there someone else? He shook his head too quickly. No, not in the way you think. I met with a colleague, someone who's been through a divorce. I just wanted to talk to someone who understood. I swear, Ashley, I haven't cheated, but I haven't been honest either. I'm sorry. I wanted to believe him. Part of me did. But the other part, the part that remembered every cold shoulder, every late night, every lie, wasn't ready to forgive. I closed my eyes, tears stinging. Madison's hurting. She feels alone. We can't keep pretending, Jonathan. We have to talk to the kids. Together. He nodded slowly. You're right. I'm sorry. I never wanted this for us. For them. We sat there for a long time, the engine off, the Texas heat building inside the car. I felt both numb and electrified, as if every nerve ending was on fire. I tried to picture our future, divided holidays, custody schedules, the house on Maple Avenue empty except for memories. But I also pictured something else. Madison, free from secrets. Tyler spared the tension that had become his normal. Me, finally letting go of the guilt that had weighed me down for years. That night, after dinner, we called a family meeting. Madison hovered at the edge of the living room, arms crossed, face pale. Tyler sprawled on the couch, oblivious, clutching his switch. Jonathan and I sat side by side, a united front for the first time in a long while. I cleared my throat, voice shaking. We need to talk about what's been going on. About us. Madison's eyes darted between us, wary. Tyler looked up, sensing the seriousness. Jonathan spoke next, softer than I'd ever heard him. Your mom and I haven't been getting along, and that's not your fault. None of this is your fault. I nodded, blinking back tears. We love you both. That will never change. But sometimes adults grow apart. It's not because of anything you did. It's something we have to work through. Madison's voice was small. Are you getting divorced? The word hung in the air, jagged and real. Jonathan reached for her hand, then Tyler's. We don't know yet. We're trying to figure things out. But we promise, whatever happens, we'll both be here for you. Tyler frowned, biting his lip. Will we have to move? I shook my head quickly. No, sweetheart. Not right now. We're going to keep things as normal as possible. The conversation was messy, full of tears and questions and long silences. Madison cried openly, anger and relief warring on her face. Tyler retreated into himself, quiet and withdrawn. But for the first time in months, there was honesty. No more pretending. No more secrets. Afterwards, Madison curled up next to me on the couch, her head on my shoulder. I just want us to be okay, she whispered. We will be, I said, not sure if I believed it, but wanting her to. Later that night, Jonathan and I stood in the kitchen, the house still except for the low hum of the dishwasher. He looked at me, eyes red-rimmed. Thank you for making me do this. For not letting me run away. I nodded, exhaustion settling into my bones. We owe them the truth, even if it hurts. He reached for my hand, and for a brief moment, I let him. That was the turning point. Not a clean break, not a Hollywood reconciliation, but but a step towards something honest. We started therapy, both as a couple and separately, meeting with a counselor in a cozy office near downtown Plano, the walls lined with books and cheerful throw pillows. Some sessions ended in tears, others in awkward silence. But slowly, we started to unravel the knots that had formed between us. Madison began seeing her own therapist too, a kind woman named Dr. Patel who wore bright scarves and listened more than she spoke. Tyler, still young enough to be resilient, bounced back faster than I expected, throwing himself into baseball and bonding with Jonathan over weekend games. I threw myself into routines, target runs, school events, wine nights with Heather. The world didn't end. It just changed. One afternoon, as I watched Madison laugh with her friends in our backyard, the Texas sun warm on my face, I realized something had shifted. The weight I'd carried for so long had lessened. We weren't perfect. We might never be the family I'd dreamed of. But we were real, honest. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. But just when I thought I'd finally found my footing, life threw me another curveball. Because a week later, as I was folding laundry in the living room, the doorbell rang. I glanced at the Ring app on my phone, expecting a package delivery, but froze when I saw who stood on the porch. Jonathan's mother, suitcase in hand. Her lips pursed in that familiar way that meant trouble. And in that moment, I realized that my journey, our journey, was far from over. What happened next was a different kind of chaos, with new secrets to uncover and new truths to face. But that's another story. And if you thought this one was intense, just wait until you hear what happened when my mother-in-law decided to move in.